DC71, The Wishing Well. Soul-touching and life-enhancing stories. The Wishing Well. Bulba and Alpha, living in the north of Africa, were very successful treasure hunters. Since their teenage years, they had made treasure hunting their permanent profession, and many treasures of the past were standing in the museum where they were employed by. One day, on their travel through Egypt, they visited a pyramid which was already emptied of its treasures. They knew that there was nothing to be found anymore, but just wanted to be there and have a feel of the past. On one early afternoon, they were sitting on the side of the pyramid, pretty high up, for they wanted to have a good view of the valley. Bulba, trying to get a comfortable position, leaned a little back, and something incredible happened. While leaning back against one of the big stones, he triggered a mechanism, and the stone moved inward and created an entrance. Excited about what just had happened, they entered the pyramid. Always having their torchlights with them, they discovered a little dusty chamber, seemingly a real secret chamber. Otherwise, it would have been discovered before. They looked around, hoping they would find treasures, either in plain sight or hidden. But the only thing that they saw was Egyptian writings on the wall. As both of them were very familiar with the old language, they soon figured out that this was a treasure map. The directions given were very clear. In order to find the treasure, it was written that they had to travel 9 hours through the heat of the desert, following an old caravan path. It was a path where people long ago had traveled on with their camels, bringing and getting merchandise to the other side of the desert. Then it was further written that after these 9 hours they would reach an oasis. This particular oasis on the map did not have just a small well or pond, but it looked like a small lake. Nobody had ever heard about such a lake in the desert, so they were very skeptical. The instructions further said that they would have to dive into the lake and follow the path of the giant sand crab, which did not make any sense to them at all. They would have to climb into the light to enter the Bridge of Decisions, and there they would find the land of the 2 wishing wells. After they left the small chamber, the stone closed the entrance off again. Back at their hotel room, they started to prepare for their travel and new adventure. Much of the map was unclear to them, but they had full confidence that they would figure it all out while they were going along. It took them 2 days to prepare all that was necessary, and they started on their long 9-hour journey into the desert. Sitting on their camels, dressed in their long white robes and their heads covered with turbans, they slowly moved under the intense heat of the sun. Pretty exhausted, they arrived at the place which had to be the oasis. However, they were surprised not to find the lake which was described on the map. They got a little frightened because there was no pond, no well, no water at all. The strange thing, however, was that there was lots of palm trees standing, whose leaves were green. That only could be possible where there was plenty of water, which they could not see. They looked around, but there was no sign of water to be found. They decided to set their tents up and to return the next day, because they just had enough water to make the trip back. Rather disappointed, they went to sleep. The next morning, while crawling out of their tent, they were amazed at a new sight. The small lake, which they could not have imagined had appeared during the night. They talked about the map that had told them to dive into the lake. Excited with their new challenge, they did put their bathing suits on and took turns diving into the lake to search for something, but did not know what to expect as yet. After several hours of taking turns in diving at several places, Bulba returned to the surface with a smile on his face and said, "Alpha, I found the cave. Follow me." Alpha followed Bulba, and after holding their breath for quite a while, they entered an underground cave, where they could breathe again. As they entered, the first thing they saw was a huge skeleton of a giant crab that had created these underground paths. "This must have been millions of years old, because I have never seen or heard of crabs that become this big of a size," they both agreed with each other. Several times they had to swim back to the oasis to transport their luggage, which they carefully wrapped in plastic. Every time when they had swum back to the oasis, the lake had become smaller and smaller, and as Bulba on the last trip dove into the lake once more, he looked back and saw the surface closing itself off. There was no light to be seen any more. After they had rearranged their things and dried off, they went exploring, walking into the many different tunnels. After several hours, they found a spot on the ceiling where natural light was shining through. They took the chisels and discovered a tunnel leading up to the light. It was steep and was dangerous to climb up, and they were very happy that they had brought their mountain climbing gear. As they stepped up on top, outside the tunnel, they ended up on a little rocky plateau standing in the middle of an enormous canyon. They looked up in the sky, and to their amazement they saw various moons. The rocky plateau was the size of a house, and on the left side they saw a bridge over the very deep canyon, and on the right side there was another bridge, each bridge leading to a different country. However, it was very hard to see far because each country was covered in a cloud of mist, full with colors. They, they started for some time over the right bridge, as their eyes started to get used to the sight, and then they could see a little more. They saw houses spread out over the countryside. It looked quiet and peaceful. Seemingly there was not too much to do on that side. As they turned and kept looking to the left, they saw in the distance a palace, surrounded by many villages and many people moving about. The decision was not hard to make. They decided to go over the left bridge leading to the country where there was most activity. As they went over the left bridge and walked through the mist of shining colors, the view became clearer and clearer. They found themselves walking in a paradise-like country. The road they were walking on reflected in the sun because it was made of precious metals. The houses were made of huge gems. Everywhere they looked, they found more and more precious sights. Also, everywhere they looked, there were individuals moving about, and Bulba went up to one of them passing by and tried to make contact and wanted to start a conversation. The person did not speak their language, and the only thing he did was he pointed to a huge crystal palace and mentioned the name Nuba. And every time they passed another person, the same thing happened. So that was seemingly what they had to do, to go to the crystal palace to find Nuba. Getting closer to the palace, they found themselves walking on a road made with marble in all colors of the rainbow. On each side of the road they saw various fruit trees from which they served themselves. Everything here was very lush and rich. Most individuals were all dressed in beautiful silken clothes and wearing lots of jewelry. Golden and silver horse carriages were traveling in and out from the palace and the village surrounding it. Finally, they ended up at the huge palace and asked if they could speak with Nuba, seemingly the queen of this country. They were escorted to the big throne chamber, where Nuba, dressed in the most beautiful clothes, was sitting on her throne. To their relief, Bulba and Alpha found Queen Nuba addressing them in their language. "Welcome, my friends," she spoke. "You have found the most incredible treasure in existence. If you look out of the window on your right, you will see a beautiful well in the courtyard. This is our wishing well. Whenever you have a wish, you go to this well, and you speak your wish into the well, and your wish will come true." "Any wish?" asked Bulba. "Yes, any," replied the queen. "How many wishes?" they almost asked at the same time. "Unlimited wishes. And you are very lucky, because today the well is officially closed, and this is the only day of the week, but I grant you permission to make your first wish today. Be aware, however, that there are two restrictions. You can only make one wish per visit, and the wish needs to be about something you want to have here in my country. Sometimes the well fulfills your wish immediately, and sometimes you have to wait for a little while. But for sure, the wish you ask for will eventually come true. I wish you a happy stay in my country." After Bulba and Alpha left the throne chamber, they made their way into the garden, and each of them started with their first wish. As they decided to stay around in that country, the first wish was very clear for them, for they needed to have shelter, and so they wished for a beautiful house in the village, which was instantly granted through the well, and that same day they moved into their new home. Their life started with the idea of an everyday visiting to the wishing well. However, it was not as easy, as there were long waiting lines in the courtyard every day. But the attraction of wishing for a new wish or waiting for a wish that had not come through yet was strong enough for them to want to stand in line, even though some days they had to spend an entire day to get to the well. So this went on for years, and Bulba and Alpha were leading rich lives, and there was always something else in their mind coming up that they could wish for. Bulba, however, was not completely satisfied, although he had everything he possibly needed and could wish for. He was a little different from Alpha, who was only occupied with thinking about the new wish of the day. Bulba had watching carefully all the people in Nuba's country. He had not seen really happy faces. Yes, he had seen people who had all the riches of the world and standing like robots every day in line to make their new wish, or impatiently waiting for a wish which had not come through yet. It also had become clear to him why almost nobody spoke the same language. There was no time. Everybody was just busy with themselves, and wishing was the activity of the day. Alpha never seemed to think back of where they came from, but Bulba sometimes missed the real treasure hunting, going through the dangers and challenges. This was all too easy for him. He had been thinking what to take with him when he would return back to his country. In his mind he had been thinking of wishing and taking his brother back home again, but on the other hand he did not want to wish for this, as his brother seemed to be content and satisfied where he was. However, that wish would not have been granted at all, as it was something not taking place in Nuba's country. They had had talks about the subject, and one day Bulba told Alpha that he would be going back home again. "You're crazy," Alpha told him. "We have everything we want here, and more is coming." "I need to follow my heart," said Bulba, and the two brothers said their goodbyes. On his way to the little rock plateau in the middle of the canyon where the two bridges met, a lot of thoughts were crossing Bulba's mind. He was thinking, when I go back to my country, in a way, I will be doing the same thing again that I have been doing here, searching for treasures. but the only difference is that it is more adventurous in my country. He came to the conclusion that both worlds were actually not really satisfying, always on the road for something new and waiting if there would be a treasure in the end. Standing on the rocky plateau, before stepping down into the tunnel, he sat down and looked to the bridge on the right-hand side and the country behind it. And he made up his mind. Before I return home, I just as well might find out about the other country. I know that where I came from and where I was going to, and both countries do not satisfy me. As he walked over the bridge through the mist of shining colors, a great peace was entering his heart. It was a beautiful country with simple houses here and there. Some people were working on the fields, and as he kept walking and came face to face with some people, he noticed either a smile on their face or happiness in their eyes. Without asking for anything or any direction, all those that crossed his path greeted him in his language and pointed to a house standing on a hill, mentioning that he should visit Yeba. Yeba was living in a simple house, and after he had knocked on the door he got permission to enter. An elderly lady who was moving about in the kitchen introduced herself as Yeba. Please take a seat anywhere you want. After he had introduced himself and had taken his seat, he started to ask questions. Why are there so few people here? It is jammed packed on the other side. This question is very simple to answer, said Yeba. In the land of Nuba, as you know, you have the well of unlimited wishes, and most people get drawn to that. I also have a well. However, at this well, you can only wish for one wish. It is the wish of not wanting to wish anymore. Not too many people are ready for that. So now you understand that there are only very few people in my country. You see, said Yeba, to find contentment in life and happiness is to be content what we have and not to be busy with wishes. Then there are other treasures, just waiting for us when we live this kind of life, for nature and life itself is full of gifts. Treasures are given at the right moment and the right time, treasures which can make us completely happy and at peace. At this moment, these treasures are far beyond your imagination, but you can get it only when you are ready to not wish anymore. Oh, that will take a lot of practice, said Bulba, but I think I can manage this. Yeba laughed. I will tell you when you are ready to make this wish. First you need to listen and follow my instructions. At the end of the village there is a yellow house. It is not occupied. Use it as your living quarters. Go there and start practicing not to wish anymore. Lead a simple life, do some farming, and empty your mind of wishes. He had thought it would be much easier, and many times he had doubts. He changed his mind and visited his country various times, and also visited his brother, but every time he returned, he got more and more convinced that he did not want the lives in either of those two countries. It was a lot of struggle with his mind, which always wanted to come up with something new, or an excuse. Any time he visited the country of Nuba, he had tried to convince his brother Alpha to come with him. His brother called him crazy and said, "Why leave here when we can have everything we want? I am happy here." Bulba grew older. He stopped visiting his brother and stopped returning to his old country. Then one day, Yeba called for him. And then Yeba said, "Bulba, you have come very far, and it's time for you to make your wish. Are you ready?" Yes, I am, spoke Bulba. Yeba led Bulba to her little backyard, where an old stone well was standing surrounded with beautiful flowers. So, said Yeba, it is your time now to find the most incredible treasure in existence, which you deserve. Go and stand on the edge. Bulba walked over to the well and used the stone steps to reach the edge of the well. Make your wish to not wish any more, and after you have done so, with full trust, without thoughts, jump into the well, which will lead you into the realm of real adventures and a real treasure. Most of the things you did and wished for were from the realm of familiar things, except for the treasures you found as a treasure hunter. It was searching about the unknown, and now you can really go into the void, which is really adventuring. Yeba watched Bulba making his wish, and then he jumped into the well without any fear, into the darkness of the well, and as he went down and down deeper into the well, it slowly became brighter and brighter around him, as if he had entered a tunnel of light. Beautiful sound and music entered his ears, and Bulba knew he was entering a realm where it all would be about new and unfamiliar, which always had been the reason why he had chosen to be a treasure hunter. What the story could bring us. In order to achieve any object, one-pointedness is required. So when we wish to become that which we truly are, and to find out that we are eternal conscious living energy forces, we cannot have any wish for worldly things anymore. Also, by wishing no more, we get carried by the life force which will guide us through life. When we wish, we actually do not trust, and we separate ourselves from this guidance. During life it is as well not to go for the familiar, for this is living in fear with false control. For the law of nature is that everything constantly changes, and that we can have an ongoing adventure of new, but we must be open to the void and the unknown.